Tom had always carried a quiet dream in his heart. For many years, while working long hours in the city, he thought about a small cabin by the water. He imagined mornings when the sunlight touched the surface of the lake, evenings when the wind carried the soft sound of crickets, and nights when the stars reflected on calm waters. It was not a dream of luxury. It was a dream of peace, of freedom, and of having a place that truly felt like home. After saving for a long time, Tom finally found the cabin. It was small, built of old wood, with a roof that needed a little care, but it was beautiful in his eyes. The cabin stood at the edge of a wide lake, surrounded by tall pine trees that whispered in the wind. The road to the place was quiet, almost hidden, and few people passed by unless they lived nearby. For Tom, it was perfect. The day he moved in was filled with both excitement and tiredness. His little moving truck rattled along the narrow road as he smiled at the sight of his cabin coming closer. He stepped out and took a deep breath. The air smelled different here, cleaner, lighter, almost carrying a taste of freedom. "This is it," he whispered to himself, his eyes glowing with hope. "This is my new beginning." Tom started carrying boxes inside. Some were filled with books, some with kitchen items, and others with things that carried memories from his old life. As he worked, he felt his heart getting lighter. The dream was becoming real, and every step into the cabin made it more alive. But peace, sometimes, is fragile. As Tom bent down to lift another box, he noticed a woman standing near the edge of his driveway. She was dressed neatly, her arms crossed tightly, her expression sharp and questioning. She did not smile, nor did she greet him. She simply stood there, watching. Tom wiped his forehead and offered a polite smile. "Good morning," he said kindly. The woman stepped closer. "Are you moving in here?" she asked, her voice carrying a tone that felt less like curiosity and more like a demand. "Yes," Tom replied gently. "I just bought this cabin." Her eyes narrowed. "Well, you should know this area is managed by the HOA," she said quickly. "There are rules to follow. No loud noise, no long parking, and trucks like that," she pointed at his moving vehicle, "are not supposed to block the road." Tom paused. His realtor had been very clear, the cabin was not part of any homeowners association. It stood apart, free from such rules. But he did not want to argue on his first day. He smiled again, hoping kindness would soften the moment. "I understand," he said calmly. "But this cabin isn't under the HOA. I checked the papers carefully before buying it." The woman's lips tightened. "That's what everyone says until they learn better," she answered. Then, without another word, she walked away, her footsteps sharp against the gravel. Tom stood there, a little puzzled, but he brushed it off. He had expected peace, not arguments. Still, he told himself that perhaps she was just being cautious, maybe even protective of her community. People sometimes acted strict at first but softened with time. He returned to his boxes, humming softly to keep his spirit light. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, the lake sparkled, and Tom felt the satisfaction of progress. By afternoon, half the cabin was filled with his belongings. Then, just as he was carrying in a lamp, he noticed flashing lights approaching. A police car rolled slowly down the quiet road and stopped right in front of his cabin. Two officers stepped out. "Afternoon, sir," one of them said kindly. "We got a call about a disturbance and possible violation of neighborhood rules." Tom blinked in surprise. "Disturbance? Violation?" he asked. The officer nodded. "A resident reported that your truck is blocking the road and that you might be moving in without following HOA guidelines." Tom sighed softly, though he stayed calm. He explained everything: the cabin deed, the papers that proved it wasn't under HOA, the clear information given by his realtor. The officers listened carefully. After checking, they agreed that Tom was right. "You're fine here," one officer said with a smile. Enjoy your new place. Sorry about the trouble. When they left, Tom stood by his cabin, the weight of disappointment pressing against his chest. His very first day at the lake had brought not only hard work but also conflict he had not asked for. He looked at the calm waters in the distance, trying to remind himself why he had come here. This is still my dream, he whispered to himself. No one can take that away. Yet in the back of his mind, the image of the woman with folded arms remained. He had met his first neighbor, and she had called the police on him. And though Tom did not know it yet, this was only the beginning of a story that would change the road and his life forever. Tom woke the next morning to the sound of birdsong drifting through the trees. The air was cool and fresh, and the sunlight gently touched the lake outside his window. For a moment, everything felt perfect again. He brewed a cup of coffee, stepped onto the porch, and breathed in the quiet. The memory of flashing police lights from the day before faded slightly, and he told himself, it was just a misunderstanding. Today will be better. But sometimes, problems don't end so quickly. By mid-morning, Tom was outside, unpacking more boxes from his truck. He was setting up simple furniture inside, a table here, a chair there, when he heard footsteps again. He looked up and saw the same woman from yesterday, Karen, walking toward him with a firm stride. Her face carried the same serious look, as if she were a guard protecting her territory. Good morning, Tom greeted, keeping his voice polite. Karen didn't return the smile. I see you are still here, she said, her tone clipped. Tom set the box down and wiped his hands. Yes, I live here now. I'm still moving things in. Karen crossed her arms tightly. You need to understand something. Everyone in this area follows HOA rules. That means paint colors, yard care, quiet hours, parking, and lake access. If you think you're an exception, you're mistaken. Tom remained calm. He had learned long ago that raising his voice never solved anything. I respect that your house is part of the HOA, he said gently. But this cabin is not under the HOA. I made sure before buying it. It's private property. Karen shook her head quickly. That's what you believe, but it won't last. I've lived here for 15 years. I know every rule. You can't just move in and ignore them. Tom tried one last time to ease the tension. Look, I want to be a good neighbor. I'm not here to disturb anyone. I just want to enjoy my cabin. But Karen's eyes stayed hard. We'll see about that, she muttered before walking away. The rest of the day was quieter, but Tom couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. He tried focusing on small joys: hanging a painting, arranging his bookshelf, setting up a simple desk by the window where he could watch the lake. Still, every time he thought of Karen's words, a weight settled on his heart. Why is she so determined to make me follow rules that don't even apply? He wondered. In the evening, Tom decided to take a walk by the water. The sunset painted the sky in orange and gold, and the lake reflected every color. He hoped the calm view would wash away his worries. As he stood at the dock, he met another neighbor, an older man named Ben, who was fishing quietly. You must be the new cabin owner, Ben said with a smile. Yes, Tom replied. I'm Tom. Welcome, Ben said warmly. Not many new folks move in around here. It's mostly the same families for years. Tom felt a little lighter. Thank you. I was hoping to find peace here. But I've already had a difficult meeting with one of the neighbors. Ben chuckled knowingly. Let me guess, Karen. Tom nodded slowly. Don't worry too much, Ben said. She's strict with everyone. She thinks she runs the whole lake. But she doesn't. Just keep to yourself and enjoy your cabin. Tom smiled in relief. That's good to hear. I don't want any trouble. Ben nodded. Most of us are friendly. Karen just takes things too seriously. Tom went to bed that night with mixed feelings. On one hand, he felt reassured by Ben's words. On the other, he knew Karen wasn't finished. Something in her manner told him she would not let things go. His suspicion proved true the very next day. Tom had parked his truck a little off the road to unload some heavier items. While carrying in a small wooden table, he suddenly heard Karen's voice again, sharp and loud. "You can't leave that truck there. It's blocking the road." Tom looked around. The road was clear. His truck was parked on his own land, not on the path. He took a slow breath and explained calmly, "The road is open. I'm parked on my property. No one is blocked." Karen shook her head. "That doesn't matter. You're disturbing the peace. I already called the HOA about you. If they can't stop this, I'll call the police again." Tom felt his chest tighten. He had wanted nothing but peace, but here was conflict on his very doorstep. He looked at her with steady eyes and replied, "Karen, I'm not breaking any rules. I'm not part of the HOA. I only want to move in quietly." But she had already turned away, walking briskly toward her house, muttering words he couldn't hear. Minutes later, Tom saw her on her phone, pacing outside. He had no doubt who she was speaking to. And in that moment, Tom realized something: this was not just a misunderstanding. This was going to be a battle, one he never asked for, but one he would have to face. The next morning, Tom decided he needed answers. He had moved into his cabin only a few days ago, yet his peace was already broken. Karen's constant interference, the police visit, and the endless talk about rules that did not apply to him, it was too much. He wanted to settle this once and for all. So, after breakfast, Tom drove into town. He parked outside the county office, a tall brick building with large glass doors. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. Rows of shelves and filing cabinets lined the room, and behind a counter sat a clerk, an older man with kind eyes and silver hair. "Good morning," Tom said politely. "I need to check property records for my cabin near the lake. I just moved in, and I want to make sure everything is clear." The clerk nodded and typed something into the computer. After a few moments, he stood and disappeared into the back room. When he returned, he carried a thick folder filled with maps and documents. "This is the file," the clerk explained, laying it on the counter. "It shows your cabin, the land boundaries, and the road connected to it." Tom leaned closer, curious. He traced the lines on the map with his finger. There was his cabin, drawn neatly near the edge of the lake. Around it stretched a section of land larger than he had realized. But then something caught his eye: the road leading into the neighborhood, the very road Karen and the other houses used every day, was shaded in the same color as his property. Tom blinked, uncertain. "Wait, this road is mine." The clerk adjusted his glasses and looked at the map carefully. "Yes. According to these records, the private road that leads from the main street to your cabin and continues toward the other houses was included in your deed. It belongs to your property." Tom's heart beat faster. "So, that means I own the road everyone uses?" "That's correct," the clerk replied. "It's unusual, but it happens. Sometimes, landowners don't realize exactly what is included until they check the records." For a moment, Tom was speechless. He had been worried about Karen's power over him, about the HOA rules she tried to force on him. But here was the truth: the very ground she drove on every day was his. The clerk smiled gently. "I suggest you keep this file safe. It might be useful if anyone questions your rights." Tom thanked him, gathered the papers, and walked out of the building with a mix of shock and relief. The sun shone brightly, but everything around him felt different. He had come seeking peace, not power, yet now he held both in his hands. On his drive back to the cabin, Tom thought deeply. He didn't want to start a fight. He wasn't the type of man who enjoyed conflict. All he wanted was quiet mornings, evenings by the water, and a life free from unnecessary arguments. But Karen had pushed him from the very beginning. And now, the truth gave him an unexpected choice: ignore her or remind her that she had no right to control him. When Tom arrived at the cabin, he spread the documents on his small wooden table. He studied every page carefully. The lines were clear. The county had marked the road as part of his land. It wasn't shared, it wasn't community property, it was his alone. Tom leaned back in his chair and sighed. "So this is the answer," he whispered. The next afternoon, Tom was sitting on his porch when he saw Karen walking toward him again. She held a clipboard in her hand, and her face carried the same firm look as always. "I've spoken with the HOA board," she began before even saying hello. "They've confirmed that you must follow community rules if you live here." Tom stayed calm. He gestured to the empty chair on his porch. "Karen, maybe you should sit down. I have something to show you." Karen frowned but stepped closer. "I don't need to sit. I just need you to understand the rules." Without arguing, Tom stood and went inside. He returned with the folder of documents from the county office. Carefully, he opened it and pointed at the map. "Do you see this?" he said softly. "This is my property line. It doesn't just cover the cabin. It covers the road, too. The very road you use to drive home every day. According to the county, it belongs to me." For the first time, Karen's expression changed. Her eyes widened slightly, and the confident look in her face cracked just a little. "That can't be right," she said quickly. "That road is for the neighborhood." Tom shook his head gently. "No, Karen. It's part of my deed. I didn't plan it this way, but it's the truth." She stood there, silent for a moment, her fingers tightening on the clipboard. For once, she had no quick reply. When Karen finally walked away, Tom felt a strange mix of emotions. He hadn't raised his voice, and he hadn't threatened her. He had only shown the truth. Yet he knew this discovery had changed everything. Karen had tried to control him with rules. She had called the police, spoken with the HOA, and argued again and again. But now, Tom realized, the power she thought she had was an illusion. He didn't want revenge, and he didn't want trouble. But he also knew one thing clearly: from this moment on, he wasn't the one at risk. The road to Karen's house and every choice she made from now on ran across land that was his. And that changed the story completely. The days after Tom's discovery felt strangely quiet. The folder from the county office sat neatly on his desk, and every time he looked at it, he felt a calm strength inside him. He did not plan to use it as a weapon, but he knew it was there if needed. Still, the uneasy feeling remained. Karen had seen the papers, but Tom doubted she would let the matter rest. She was not the kind of person to step back easily. One morning, Tom was fixing a loose board on his porch when a small group of neighbors passed by. They waved and smiled, and Tom returned the greeting warmly. Unlike Karen, most of the neighbors seemed friendly. A woman named Linda stopped for a moment and introduced herself. "Welcome to the lake," she said kindly. "I heard you bought the old cabin. It's good to see it lived in again." "Thank you," Tom replied. "It feels like home already." Linda hesitated before lowering her voice. "I should warn you. Karen can be difficult. She means well, but she takes the HOA rules very seriously. Don't let her discourage you. Most of us don't mind how you live here." Her words reassured Tom, yet also confirmed what he already knew: Karen wasn't finished. That afternoon, Tom received a letter in his mailbox. The envelope had the HOA logo printed at the top, even though his cabin wasn't part of it. Inside was a list of violations: grass not trimmed short enough, moving truck parked too long, and unapproved dock installation. Tom read it slowly, then shook his head. The grass was natural, not overgrown. His truck was already gone. And the dock? It was a small wooden platform that had been part of the cabin long before he bought it. He folded the letter neatly and placed it on the desk beside the property papers. He decided not to reply. Silence, he thought, might be the best answer for now. But Karen didn't stop. The next day, as Tom was unpacking books inside, he heard her voice outside again. "That dock needs to be removed," she said firmly. "The HOA board will fine you if you don't." Tom walked outside slowly, keeping his tone calm. "Karen, I appreciate your concern. But this cabin is not under HOA control. The dock has always been here. I'm not removing it." Karen's eyes narrowed. "You think you can just ignore rules? That's not how communities work." Tom met her gaze steadily. "Respect works both ways," he said gently. "I haven't complained about you. I only ask for the same in return." For a moment, Karen looked as if she wanted to argue more, but then she turned sharply and walked away. The tension grew heavier each day. Tom tried to focus on building his new life, fixing up the cabin, planting a small garden, and enjoying quiet mornings by the water. But Karen's presence was always there, like a shadow at the edge of his peace. One evening, Tom invited two friends from town to visit. They brought food, and together they sat on the porch, laughing softly and enjoying the sunset. For Tom, it felt good to share the beauty of the lake. But halfway through the evening, Karen appeared again. She stood on the edge of his driveway, arms crossed, her voice sharp. "You can't have loud gatherings like this," she declared. "There are rules about noise after 6 o'clock." Tom's friends exchanged surprised glances. The laughter wasn't loud, only gentle conversation. The birds were louder than they were. Tom spoke firmly but politely. "Karen, this is my home. We're not disturbing anyone. Please, let us enjoy the evening." But Karen muttered something under her breath and stormed off. His friends looked at him with sympathy. "She doesn't seem easy to deal with," one of them said. Tom sighed. "She isn't. But I'll manage." By the end of the week, Tom received a second letter, this time slipped under his door. It was written in Karen's handwriting. "Your presence here is disruptive. If you cannot follow the community's standards, perhaps this cabin is not the right place for you." Tom read it quietly. Instead of anger, he felt something else: resolve. He thought of the folder on his desk, the map showing the road that belonged to him. He hadn't used it yet, but he could. The turning point came one bright Saturday morning. Tom was planning to take his canoe out on the lake. As he prepared, he noticed Karen's car parked halfway across his driveway. She stood beside it, waiting. "You can't keep ignoring the HOA," she said firmly. "You must agree to the rules, or things will get harder for you." Tom set the paddle down slowly. He looked at her with calm but steady eyes. "Karen," he said, his voice quiet but clear, "from the first day I arrived, you've made life here difficult. You called the police, you sent letters, and now you block my driveway. I have respected you, but this has to stop." Karen frowned. "And what if it doesn't?" Tom's words were simple, but they carried weight. "Then maybe it's time I remind you whose road you're driving on." Karen blinked, startled. She opened her mouth to reply, but no words came. For once, she was silent. That night, Tom sat on his porch with the stars shining above. The lake was calm, but inside him, something had shifted. He realized he could no longer let Karen's actions go unanswered. The peace he dreamed of was worth protecting. And now, he had the power to do it. The tension was no longer just a burden. It was becoming a turning point. The days passed slowly after the driveway incident. Tom thought maybe Karen would step back, but she didn't. If anything, she became more determined. She seemed to believe that if she kept pressing him, he would eventually give in to her demands. But Tom was no longer the same man who had first arrived at the cabin with excitement and hope. He had changed. The folder of property papers was still on his desk, and every time Karen pushed him further, his decision grew clearer. One morning, Tom walked outside with a mug of coffee in his hand. The lake shimmered under the sunlight, and the pines whispered softly in the breeze. It should have been a perfect day. But then he noticed something unusual. Karen's car was parked at the side of the road again, but this time, it wasn't only hers. A small group of HOA members stood with her. They were talking loudly, pointing at his cabin, and scribbling notes on clipboards. Tom sighed. He walked over calmly, his steps steady. "What's going on here?" he asked. Karen turned to him, her face firm. "We're here to document violations. You're not following community standards, and the board will take action soon." Tom stayed quiet for a moment, letting her words hang in the air. Then, slowly, he reached into his folder and pulled out a copy of the county map. He held it up so everyone could see. "This road you're standing on," Tom said softly, "isn't part of the community. It's part of my property. The county records confirm it. That means I allow access here. Not the HOA." The group of neighbors looked at one another, confused. Some frowned, others raised their eyebrows. Karen's expression shifted, though she quickly tried to cover it. "That can't be true," she said sharply. "This road belongs to everyone." Tom shook his head. "No, Karen. It belongs to me. I didn't ask for it to be this way, but the papers are clear. You've been telling me what I can and cannot do. But from now on, remember every step you take on this road is only because I allow it." The silence that followed was heavy. Even the breeze through the trees seemed to pause. Karen finally spoke, though her voice was less certain. "You're bluffing." Tom didn't argue. He simply handed one of the neighbors a copy of the document. The man scanned it carefully, then nodded slowly. "He's right," the neighbor admitted. "It says here the road is included in his deed. This isn't HOA land." Karen's face tightened. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. For the first time, her authority had slipped. That night, Tom sat on his porch, watching the moonlight ripple across the water. He didn't feel proud or victorious. Instead, he felt thoughtful. He hadn't wanted to embarrass Karen in front of others, but he also couldn't allow her to keep controlling him. He whispered to himself, "Peace isn't about avoiding conflict. Sometimes it's about standing firm." The next few days were strangely quiet. Karen didn't appear at his cabin, and there were no new letters. But Tom knew this calm was not the end. It was only the space before the next storm. Sure enough, on the following Saturday, he returned from a trip into town to find his driveway blocked again, this time with Karen's car parked directly in the middle. She stood waiting for him, arms crossed, her expression a mixture of defiance and nervousness. Tom stepped out of his truck and approached her slowly. "Why are you here, Karen?" he asked calmly. "You can't keep doing this," she said quickly. "You can't keep pretending that road belongs to you. The board won't allow it. You're making things harder for everyone." Tom's voice was quiet but steady. "I'm not pretending. The road is mine. But I haven't stopped anyone from using it. I've been patient. I've stayed respectful. But you keep pushing me." Karen's eyes flashed. "Because you don't belong here if you won't follow the rules." Tom looked at her for a long moment, then spoke with gentle firmness. "No, Karen. It's not about belonging. It's about respect. From the moment I arrived, you've treated me like an outsider. You called the police, you wrote letters, you embarrassed me in front of neighbors. And still, I never stopped you from driving on this road. I never stopped anyone. But now, I have to ask, how long do you think I should stay silent while you block my home? Karen's voice faltered. For the first time, she had no sharp reply. She stepped back, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. Tom moved her car slowly aside with her reluctant help, and then he turned to her once more. His words were calm, but they carried weight. Karen, I don't want to fight. I came here for peace. But peace doesn't mean letting someone walk over me. If this continues, I'll make it clear to the HOA, to the county, and to everyone else, this road is mine. And if I need to, I'll decide who can and who cannot use it. Karen's face turned pale. She stared at him for a long second, then hurried back to her car and drove away without another word. As Tom stood there, the sound of her car fading into the distance, he felt something shift inside him. This was no longer about small arguments or letters. It was about the life he wanted to build, the life he had dreamed of when he bought the cabin. He realized he could no longer wait for Karen to change. The time had come to take control of his own peace. And with that, the turning point had arrived. The week after Karen blocked Tom's driveway felt heavy with silence. For the first time since moving into the cabin, she didn't come near him. No letters appeared in his mailbox. No sudden shouts broke the air. But Tom knew it was not over. Karen was quiet only because she was planning her next move. Tom spent those quiet days thinking. He walked along the lake, fixed small things around his cabin, and looked often at the folder on his desk. The map inside was clear, the road was his. He hadn't wanted to use it against anyone, but the time was coming when he would have to act. On Thursday afternoon, as Tom was tending to his small garden, two neighbors came to visit. It was Ben, the fisherman, and Linda, the kind woman he had met earlier. Both of them looked uneasy. Tom, Ben began, scratching the back of his neck, we heard talk that you might close the road. Tom set down his watering can and shook his head gently. I haven't closed anything. But Karen has pushed me too far. She's made it impossible to live here in peace. Linda nodded slowly. We understand. She's been difficult with all of us at times. But for most of us, this road is the only way to our homes. If it were closed, she trailed off, her face worried. Tom gave a calm smile. Don't worry. I don't want to punish good neighbors. I won't take away access from anyone who respects me. The road will stay open for those who act with kindness. Ben sighed in relief. That's fair. We just wanted to hear it from you. Tom nodded. All I want is peace. I won't take that away from others. But I also won't let Karen keep treating me this way. That very weekend, the final push came. On Saturday morning, Tom woke early, planning to enjoy a quiet day on the lake. But as he stepped outside, he saw Karen again. She was standing in the middle of the road, clipboard in hand, speaking loudly to two men from the HOA. This man refuses to follow the rules, she declared, pointing toward Tom's cabin. He is breaking every guideline. He is disturbing the community. We must act now. The two men looked uncomfortable. They shifted their weight and glanced at Tom as he walked over. Karen, Tom said calmly, you need to stop. I've told you before, I am not under the HOA. Karen's voice grew sharper. Everyone here follows the rules. You think you're special, but you're not. If you won't respect the community, then you don't belong here. Tom took a deep breath, then pulled out the folder once more. He opened it slowly and showed the map to the two men. This road, he said clearly, is mine. It is written in the county records. I did not ask for it to be this way, but it is the truth. And now, I am making a decision. The two men leaned over the map, reading it carefully. One of them nodded slowly. He's right, he said. This isn't HOA land. Karen's face turned red. That doesn't matter. The road connects to all of us. It must belong to the community. Tom shook his head firmly. It belongs to me. And until now, I have allowed everyone to use it freely. But today, I make this clear, the road will stay open for neighbors who respect me. If anyone chooses to treat me unfairly, then I have the right to close it to them. The two men looked at each other, clearly unwilling to get caught in the middle. Without another word, they left. Karen stood frozen, her lips pressed tight. For once, she had no audience to support her. That evening, Tom placed a small wooden sign at the start of the road. The words were simple: private road, access by permission. He didn't block it with a gate, nor did he make threats. But the message was clear. The road was his, and the choice to share it was his as well. As he hammered the last nail into the sign, he noticed neighbors gathering nearby. Some whispered, others simply watched quietly. Karen stood farther back, her arms crossed, her face pale with anger. Tom turned and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. This road will remain open for those who respect one another. I am not here to cause problems. I am here to live in peace. But I will not be treated unfairly anymore. There was silence, then a few nods. Ben gave him a thumbs up. Linda smiled softly. Even those who didn't speak seemed to understand. Karen, however, turned and stormed away without a word. That night, Tom sat on his porch, watching the stars reflect on the lake. He felt a strange calm inside him, stronger than before. He had not shouted, he had not sought revenge. He had simply set a boundary. For the first time since moving into the cabin, he felt that he truly belonged. The road was more than a piece of land. It was a symbol. It showed that peace was not something given, it was something he had to protect. And Tom knew this was only the beginning. Karen might try again. She might plan something new. But now, the balance had changed. The road decision had been made, and nothing would be the same again. The sign stood at the edge of the road like a quiet guard. Private road, access by permission. It was not big or threatening, but it was firm. Every neighbor who passed read it, and though most simply nodded in understanding, for Karen it was a reminder that the ground beneath her wheels no longer belonged to her. For Tom, life began to feel lighter. He spent mornings on his porch with coffee in hand, watching the lake glow under the sunrise. He planted more flowers by the cabin, mended the old dock, and finally unpacked the last of his boxes. The cabin no longer felt like a place he had just bought, it felt like home. At first, Karen avoided him completely. For several days, she drove past without stopping, her eyes fixed forward, her face unreadable. But Tom could sense her anger each time her car rolled over the road. She did not argue now, yet her silence was heavy with pride she did not want to swallow. The other neighbors, however, seemed to warm to Tom. Ben stopped by often, sometimes bringing fresh fish from the lake. Linda shared a basket of bread one afternoon and stayed to chat about gardening. Even children from another family waved at Tom as they rode bicycles down the road. Tom felt a new sense of belonging. He realized that Karen was only one person, and most of the community did not share her hostility. In fact, some even thanked him quietly for keeping the road open, showing respect to those who respected him. But the real test came a week later. One rainy evening, as Tom was sitting by the fire, he heard a knock on his door. When he opened it, he found Karen standing there, holding an umbrella. Her expression was not sharp this time, it was uncertain, almost tired. "Can I come in for a moment?" she asked softly. Tom hesitated but then stepped aside. "Of course." She entered slowly, her eyes moving around the cabin. For the first time, she seemed less like a strict enforcer of rules and more like an ordinary neighbor. She set the umbrella by the door and folded her hands. "I wanted to talk," she began. I know we started off on the wrong foot. Tom stayed quiet, letting her continue. I thought I was protecting the community, she admitted. I've lived here for many years. I've seen people come and go. Some left the place messy. Some ignored the rules and caused trouble. I didn't want that to happen again. Her voice was softer now, without the sharpness that usually cut through every word. But I see now, she continued, that you're not like that. You take care of your cabin. You're kind to the neighbors. And, she paused, her pride holding her back. And I know the road is yours. The papers are clear. I can't argue with that. Tom listened quietly, then spoke gently. Karen, I understand. You care about this place. But from the first day, you didn't give me a chance. You judged me before you knew me. That hurt more than anything. Karen lowered her eyes. I know. And I'm sorry. The room was quiet except for the sound of rain tapping against the windows. Tom thought carefully. He could have turned her apology into a victory, reminding her of all the times she made his life difficult. But instead, he chose a different path. Karen, he said softly, I never wanted a fight. I only wanted peace. The road will stay open. Not because I have to, but because that's the kind of neighbor I want to be. All I ask in return is respect. Karen looked up, her eyes filled with something Tom hadn't seen before understanding. She nodded slowly. You'll have it, she said. From that evening onward, things began to change. Karen no longer called the police or sent letters. She still carried her strong personality, but she stopped interfering with Tom's life. Sometimes, she even offered a polite nod when they crossed paths. It wasn't friendship, but it was peace. The rest of the neighbors grew closer to Tom. They invited him to small gatherings, shared meals, and even asked for help with small tasks. He became part of the community not because of Hoa rules, but because of simple kindness and respect. One night, as Tom sat on his porch, the stars reflecting on the calm lake, he thought back to his first day. The flashing police lights, the sharp words, the arguments, it all seemed far away now. What remained was the steady sound of the water, the quiet glow of lanterns in nearby homes, and the knowledge that he had protected his dream. Peace, he realized, was never something handed freely. It was something built, piece by piece, choice by choice. It required patience, but it also required strength. And in the end, he had found it. Tom smiled, lifting his cup of coffee toward the stars. His cabin by the lake was no longer just a place to live. It was a place of balance, respect, and quiet victory. The road to Karen's house still ran across his land, but it no longer felt like a burden. Instead, it felt like a reminder that sometimes, the strongest power is not control, but the decision to choose peace.